The views and opinions expressed on the cap are those of the hosts. They do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of OldMilk Media. Any opinions stated aren't intended to offend anyone. On this episode of the Cap Podcast, we react to Glorious by GloRilla. Welcome back. This is episode 520 of your critical but accurate tour through hip hop, the Cap Podcast. We are your tour guides. I am Nate Sperlin. That is Taylor McLeod. Thank you for tuning in on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you might be tuning in. Feel free to join the conversation by leaving a comment, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel. Taylor, it's been a long time, bro. How you doing today?
Good. It's been a long time since we've been on here together. I mean, we talk every single day, but it has been a long time. You know, it's a lot has changed since we were on last. You know what I mean? Like, I think I've only done one episode since I moved back across the country with you. I did obviously Future solo, and you did, I think, 3 or 4 solos because work was crazy and I was working Saturdays and Sundays. But I don't know, man. You know, I could say I can't complain. I probably could complain, but for the sake of this, I'll say can't complain.
Yeah. You and me both. But it's good to be back with you. Good to have this dialogue with you once again, as I'm sure many of the viewers were missing this dynamic as well. So that being said, let's get into the story of this episode. We're talking about Glorious by GloRilla. It is 15 tracks, 42 minutes long, and it features Lotto, Sexy Red, Mooney Long, Kirk Franklin, Maverick City Music, Kiara Shiard. I hope I pronounced that right. Chandler Moore, Megan Thee Stallion, Boss Man D-Lo, T-Pain, and Friday. Once again, join the conversation by leaving your comments on Glorious by GloRilla in the comment section below. That being said, Taylor, what were your thoughts about Glorious?
I think, and you and I talked about this a little bit, before we got on here, and I don't know, for like a debut studio album, right? There's obviously excitement for it. There's obviously hype about it. I think that GloRilla I think she makes good music, and I think she's like an incredible character in hip hop, in music in general right now, in pop culture. Like, I think that she's capitalized on the moments that she's had, right? And she's really like, established herself as like, this isn't a thing where it's just like, all right, she's here today and gone tomorrow. Like, you know what I mean? Like, GloRilla is here. Um, that being said, like in terms of reaction to this album, obviously I like it. What is it? 15 tracks?
Mhm.
Yeah, 15. So I like that because it's like digestible and you can play it a couple of times in a short amount of time and really sit with it. Um, I don't know. The word I used to describe it to you is flat.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily think that GloRilla's raps are flat or the flows are flat. I think there's a lot of production on here that sounds exactly alike. So I think a lot of the songs run together. And I think almost naturally, at least for me, this is how it goes. Once production starts becoming repetitive on a project, I think I almost subconsciously I pay attention to that more than I pay attention to what's being said. Obviously, you and I go back through a couple times to make sure that we've heard everything that's said. But I don't know. I think that flat is just the best word for this for me. I think it I wouldn't say it fell flat, right? Because that has way harsher connotations. I just think as a whole, this album is it's just relatively flat sounding to me.
Yeah. Um, I think I think calling this a debut album does a huge disservice to how I received the album. If this is just like a mixtape, or well, yeah, if it's just a mixtape, then I think I'm perfectly fine with this album. But being that it's a debut album, there's so many different expectations that I've personally like listed out throughout this year, even like throughout the years and years that we've been doing this, throughout this year specifically, in terms of what I'm expecting from a debut album. Like for example, I'm expecting it to be consistent in terms of like a consistent theme throughout. I think she does a good job of having that consistency. I also expect her to kind of tell her own story. I don't think she did that at all, really, on this album. I also expect her to kind of like branch out and try new and different sounds, but I feel like there were attempts for her to kind of do that, but at the same time, what she's doing on these songs, like for example, the song with Kirk Franklin, the song with Muni Long, I could point to as two examples of her trying a different sound, but she's doing the same exact thing on them. So it's like, yeah, you're trying to be versatile, but at the same time, what you're doing on these tracks where your versatility is supposed to be showing, is the same exact thing that you've been doing for the past 2 years, 3 years that we've known that you existed. On top of that, I think this debut album coming after she releases a mixtape 6 months ago, everything, which we didn't talk about, but it did 33,000 first week, and it was number 18 on the Billboard. Um, it kind of feels like this is rushed.
Yeah.
And the one thing you don't want, especially with music in general, but especially with a debut album, is for it to be rushed. Um, so those were really my expectations, mainly just piggybacking off my last point for her to justify the need to have two projects in 1 year. Because I don't think she does have like a cult fan base that is very clear, but at the same time, is that cult fan base big enough to justify having two projects in the same year? I don't think so. When I think about artists that can justify having multiple projects in the same year, I think about Future, huge cult fan base, NBA YoungBoy, huge cult fan base. Even like when Lil Wayne used to have the albums and then the mixtapes, like he was like the king of the world when he used to do that type of stuff. So like there's a certain level of status that allows you to be able to do something like that. And I don't think GloRilla is there yet. Um, so those are my expectations in terms of like the packaging and stuff like that. I do like the album cover. The album cover kind of reminds me of like uh late 1900s, early 2000s R&B album, and I like that feeling of it. Um, I didn't really. Besides that though, I didn't really see much buzz heading into this album. Maybe it's just because I'm just not in the same circles that GloRilla's cult fans are in. That could very much be the case, but I didn't really see much buzz coming into it at all. As far as thoughts, like I don't think she did justify having two projects in 1 year. Um, I also think that she needs to be able to. I just think there needed to be a lot more thought put into this album in terms of song construction, in terms of um track listing, in terms of versatility, just all around. Like it's just like if she would have released this project and called it a mixtape in April, I think it has the same effect as everything. And everything is a mixtape. And it's just weird to be able to say that for a debut album, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to note too that like, when you said that you didn't see a ton of buzz because maybe you're not in the circles that are supposed to be seeing the buzz, and I think that you and I mention this like mostly every time we talk about an album by a woman, right? Like there's a lot of stuff on this album, right, that doesn't apply to me and you, right? Like there's certain things that's like not I don't know. It's not going to make you and I feel the same way. It might make like a different audience feel, right? Like I I don't want to be all negative because I think that there's something to be said for like the feeling that I imagine, right? Because it doesn't
Mhm.
certain things don't make me feel this way, but like to have like an album, right, of 15 songs that are like from like a very powerful woman, like kind of like flexing that power. Like I think we have plenty of examples through here that's like whether it's like relationship stuff, right? Whether it's like, oh, like on Don't Deserve, when it's like, he doesn't deserve you. Like, and
Mhm.
whether it's like the hook where, it's like a friend saying that, whoever, some guy doesn't deserve you, or it's Glorilla being like, I know this person doesn't deserve me. And then you have multiple examples through here where she's like, she's like, yo, if a man wants to threaten me or whatever, like I'm gonna put him in the sky. You know what I mean? And it's like, and so stuff like that, right? Like I don't want to overlook any of that, right? Because there is a lot to be said for an album from a perspective that might not speak to like you and I, or but will make people feel some kind of way, right? And that is like that's ultimately like one of the biggest goals of music of any genre is to make listeners feel something, right? And so I don't think that like that necessarily is lost throughout this project. Like I think there's a lot on here that like if you can relate to certain things on here, then you might be like really like, you know what I mean, like turned up to it. Where I come from is obviously different, right? Like I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh yeah, like Glorilla's like going off. You know what I mean? And she deserves to. Like the character that she has built and just who she is, obviously, has sustained at least 2 years at this point. And you and I were talking a little bit about it before, but I think that we've seen in the last decade or so, but especially I would say like the last 5 years, where artists are famous before they have a lot of music at this point, where it used to be even when you and I were like getting to the age where you can like make your own choices
Hmm.
when it comes to music, and it's not just whatever's being played around you. And then like if you're like, I'll play this song, someone's gonna be like, no, like you know what I mean? But what it was still like artists might have like 6 or 7 mixtapes before we hear about them. Like you think of like the biggest rappers out right now. Like I mean, obviously, and I'm not lumping these two because we talked about it at length, but like Drake and Kendrick Lamar both had plenty of projects. Like I don't know if people know, but like Good Kid, Mad City was his debut studio album, but he has mixtapes going back to 2004.
Hmm.
So it's like there's a time to build up, and I think that things get more difficult now, and we've talked about it with Ice Spice and some other artists where they get famous before they establish who they are as an artist. And there's obviously, you know what I mean, there's positives and negatives to that. You run into a lot more money a lot faster at this point, it seems. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like you have more opportunities to make your own money instead of labels needing to give you however much money that you need to recoup and give back. But I do think all of that goes into making it a more difficult process to come through with a debut studio album that because I mean, and I don't know if you feel this way, but recently I've been thinking about like my favorite albums by artists. And there's a lot of artists where their debut is my favorite, right?
Hmm.
Maybe not like their debut, but the earlier work is my favorite. And it's not because of the, oh, like the good old days thing, right? It's not that. It's I didn't know that much about that artist. And then that first album told me everything that I needed to know. That was like the launch point, right?
Hmm.
But now I feel like we know so much about artists before that debut album, and you know whether that's the truth or whether that's what they convey on the internet or through interviews or whatever. I feel like we know so much more about artists before we get that debut. So you go into a debut studio album wanting to learn the story, but you already kind of have the bones of the story.
Hmm.
And so then we get an album like this, which I feel this album is more like vibes than it is like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And again, I don't want that to come across as a bad thing because the vibe on here is crazy, right? Like it's very powerful, right? And it is like there is no pulling punches when it comes to GloRilla, and I have a lot of respect for that as an artist. But I do think that there's just so many obstacles now to like putting together that first album, not mixtape, not EP, that comes into consideration and leaves us with an album like this where you know, you can play it and you're like, all right, yeah, she's Glorilla's like, you know, turns up on it, but it's like it's still like I'm looking for maybe some more depth.
Yeah. I think depth is the right word because you do raise a good point about just because of like social media and like all this other stuff. Like we do know more about artists today than we would have like people in the 1980s didn't know as much about Michael Jackson as we do now about like random people like not saying Glorilla is random, but like that's who we're talking about. So like Glorilla, right? But I do think there's something to be said for artists who like someone like Meg Thee Stallion, for example, right? We like saw everything play out before she even like wrote a song about what was going on in terms of like the Tory Lane situation and everything else that has been going on around her. But she still made music where she gave us like the full curtain pulled back view of how she was feeling as she was going through that time. So I do see what you mean in terms of like it could be harder because we do know a lot more about the artist, but still at the same time we don't know going on in the artist's head. And that's really where the music is supposed to come in for the artist to tell us what was going through your head when this happened, what was going through your head when this happened. And with Glorilla, like there has, I mean, like I guess there's this little beef going on between her and JT, which if I'm being honest, I don't really care about. So and I do understand that she does take a few shots at JT throughout this album here. But besides that, there isn't really much around Glorilla in terms of like public drama that everybody knows about for her for lack of a better term for the excuse to be, well, y'all already know, so I don't need to make a song about this. I feel like with a debut album, like even like when you look at somebody like NBA YoungBoy, the way that it's clear the way that he approached his mixtapes versus the way that he approached his albums was like two different ways. And you really got that appreciation. Like you even said it yourself, like you appreciated how he approached the album because it was stripped back, it was more vulnerable. He focused more on like song construction and things of that nature. And here I don't really get that at all. And I also think when you think about, I already mentioned Megan Thee Stallion. Rhapsody is another one who put out an album this year where she's talking about how she's feeling about certain things going on in her life, in the world, and stuff like that. And I'm not saying like GloRilla needs to have a social commentary on everything in the world, but I do think she needs to have a social commentary on everything uh, in terms of herself. And I don't really get that here. I do get the points where she's talking about like, I like this man don't deserve me. Why am I here? If this man tries to put his hands on me, I'm gonna do what I have to do, et cetera, et cetera. Like those types of songs are, there is a place here for those types of songs, but I think those songs land better for me if there is also the vulnerability of it also in terms of he did this to me. Like, for example, he cheated on me and that made me feel like this and that made me feel like this. And I didn't like that feeling. And that's when I realized, yo, like I can't be in the situation anymore. Like just more of that storytelling element. Because we do see some of the storytelling that she's capable of here on some of the songs. And it's interesting because some of the songs where her storytelling shines the brightest, it's her describing having a good time. And it's so like the picture is painted so
Yeah.
beautifully where I can, okay, your nails are pressed on, like you're going outside, you don't have a man, you don't have to worry about anything, you're just going out to have fun. Like that just comes out, that just comes across to me so vividly. So it's clear that she has the storytelling talent. It's just that what are you going to use it on? And again, not to say that using it on songs like not to use it on songs like TGIF or other songs of that nature is bad. I'm not saying that. I'm saying take that and use it for other songs where people can get a better side of you because there's so many more sides to you than um just being in the club, being outside and stuff like that. There's so many more sides to everybody. I do like the fact that she included the song with Kirk Franklin on it. I think it's Glow's Prayer.
It's the one
Yeah,
before it's Rain Down on Me.
oh, it's Rain Down on Me. Excuse me. So it is Rain Down on Me. I do like that she has that song there. That's another aspect to her personality that we're being introduced to. But then when there's songs like that, it doesn't really feel like it's her song either. The Muty Long song, I don't really it doesn't really feel like it's GloRilla's song. It feels like GloRilla's the feature on that. Even like the Meg Thee Stallion song, like the way it comes together isn't it's not as thought through as I would like it to be, especially for a debut album. So like I think that this is just terrible timing for a debut album for GloRilla, considering the fact that she did release a project this year, considering the fact that the women in hip hop have been killing it in terms of just regular albums, debut albums, in terms of Doechii. That's like probably the greatest debut album of 2024, in my opinion. And um, because of that, she's kind of like put behind the eighth wall because now like rap is a genre where we compare. I have to compare her now. I can't put her in the same conversation as Meg Thee Stallion. I can't put her in the same conversation as Lotto, and I can't put her in the same conversation as Doechii or Flo Milli. And so that being said, I would say that she's probably like a tier three rapper off of a debut album, where this is probably her most successful year because she has been killing it with the singles. She has been having this movement of this cult fan base that is continuing to grow. But then when it comes to a debut album and the pressure and the expectations that are put when you call something your debut album, this album just simply doesn't live up to it.
Yeah, and I think that like I think it's and I like the way that you and I talk about a lot of this stuff because I think there is like a human aspect to it where it's like it's way easier to paint a picture, right, of having a good time. Like it's way easier to get into all the details, like even something as simple as like, you know what I mean? It's like 95 degrees. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like something like that is like it's not the craziest bar in the world, right? But it puts you there, right? Like it takes you and puts you there. And I obviously it's so much easier to be like, yeah, here's exactly what happened when everything went good, right? Because you want to relive that. And then when you get into the more vulnerable subjects, then that's when people like music or not, that's when people's walls go up, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's when GloRilla really like leans into like the being like super super tough, and clearly she is, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's where like that shines through, where it's like right now at debut album time, like she's at a point where she's like, no, when shit gets hard, I'm just gonna like, I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna be tough about it. I'm gonna deal with it how I know how to deal with it right now. And like a lot of the time, like you talk about Rhapsody, it's like Rhapsody's been in the game for like 15 years, right,
Mhm.
or more. So it's like, I'm not again like. I really don't ever pass like crazy judgment in any of this because I know like how much just what it takes to put 15 songs together, right? And I know there's more songs that didn't make it and shit like that, but like yeah, I think I just think that from the character that we've gotten from GloRilla so far, like in interviews, in videos, in social media, like right, you want to learn more about that person, right? So you can make that investment in their career. Like my favorite artists, and I think you feel the same way. Like you start to get like invested in their career, right? And it's not like, I don't convince myself that I know artists because I listen to their music, right? But there is a level to it where it's like you hear something about one story right on one album and you're like, okay, you know what I mean? But then like the next album you get like it might not be a direct like update on that story, right? But it's like okay, you start to like be able to follow these paths. And for your favorite artists, you start to be like, all right, like this is how this happened that one time. This is how this happened. And so I think that like I mean and it's crazy too because me and you keep getting older than these artists that we're talking about, right? Like right
It's
like
not gonna stop.
no, it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. So we're talking about someone who's younger than me and you, right? And it's like and so that's where I'm like, you know what? This album isn't where, maybe I wanted it, but it's also like the edge that GloRilla raps with and puts music together with. It's like I'm gonna listen to the next one. You know what I mean? Because like there is a level of care that I'm like, I understand, like, cause she's like rapping hard on a
Yeah.
lot of these, right? There is no like, all right, let me try to get and this isn't a shot at Ice Spice, but there is no like, I'm gonna use the same formula for everything,
Mhm.
right? Like like there is like a level of like GloRilla steps to the mic and is like ready for war. And that's what comes across, right? It's like it's not you and I think the way we listen to music and the music that is our favorite music, like there is there's that depth to it, right? But this isn't me being like, oh, I wanted it on this project and didn't get it, isn't me being like it's never gonna happen.
Mhm.
And I think there's a big difference because there's some artists that you and I listen to where I'm like, all right, like I'm never gonna, you know what I mean? Like I'm not going back. But that isn't the case here. It's not the case at all. So yeah, like the depth. I wish there was maybe more because I'm interested in who GloRilla is, but at the same time, I also understand that like I mean, some artists it takes them their whole career to get vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? Like you have like a like 444 by Jay-Z came out after he was 50, right? He had
Mhm.
been vulnerable before that, right? But it's still like to get to the point where you really strip everything away and you get right to it, like it can take forever. So like I'm definitely like while I wanted it here, I'm not like, super like pissed off that it didn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is room for her to grow. Even on this album, I forgot what song, but she's like, I love criticism. So hopefully she hears this and then she's like, okay, my next album, I'm gonna be able to, I'm gonna actually tell my story and I'm gonna tell you, like, take you guys through like the ins and outs of like my everyday and stuff like that. So yeah, but like again, like there is room for her to grow. It's just that I just think that this is this just came at the wrong time because again, the she already had an album that would have lasted or carried over into next year anyway. And I don't think that there was enough time for her to put as much thought as I expect from a debut album into this one here. But playback value?
Playback value for me, uh, or no, so objectively, I think that like a song like TGIF already had legs, right?
Mhm.
So I think the playback, how we usually do it, is it's already almost happened in a way.
Yeah.
Um, so like for the rest of it, I'm thinking like, a week. Like we're also there's been a lot of bubbling up about some real big artists coming around the corner. So
Mhm.
you and I always say it. It's like, I mean, there was a stretch there before for all the dogs. I was like playback every time I was like, I don't know, people will listen till Drake drops, right? And so I'm not saying that exactly here, but I'll give it a week objectively. For me, I probably won't come back to this a ton, so I'll say a week for myself as well.
Yeah. For me, I feel like objectively the cult fan base is gonna love it, and they'll probably play it until the next GloRilla album comes out. But in terms of like, and that's the other thing too about debut albums, like it's I feel like it's more so not for your fans. It's more so for your fans to be like, see, I told you she's nice, and then like everybody who kind of doubted her, are like they can't really say
Yeah,
anything
but
because they're like, yeah, you're
yeah.
right. Like
But
I can't say anything.
when people have fans already before that debut, like a lot of fans and they're famous already, I feel like that's when things get muddy.
Yeah, but I don't think she's like famous. Like I think
I don't
she's
know, man.
famous,
I
but
don't know.
I don't think she's famous. Like I don't think she's famous. Like
She
it
moves the
could be
needle.
changing. because she is now like with like she is having these interviews and stuff like that, and she's going on a massive press run. So that could be changing, but like leading up to it, I don't know. Like it just seemed like it was more cult fan basis. But like either way, like that's the thing. Like I feel like it's supposed to be like a I told you so for her fans to be like, yo, like you can't deny this, but like if she's doing the same thing that she was doing on the previous two mixtapes, then people are like, okay, she's doing the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
so that being said, like I don't know if this album really is going to make new fans or turn or flip fans who weren't fans before or flip people who weren't fans before into becoming like diehard fans of her. So for that reason, objectively, I'll probably say a week. Subjectively for me, I don't plan on coming back to this again. So it doesn't really have much playback value for me. Final thoughts?
Yeah, so my final thought is just like I think that the production on here is a little too repetitive and it stopped me from getting as deep into listening as I wanted to. And then we talk about the lack of, depth also. So it's just I said it in the beginning, I'll say it again. It's just a little flat to me. Like that's my final reaction. Favorite tracks, I have Glow's Prayer number 1, Queen of Memphis number 2, and Stop Playing number 3.
All right. My last thoughts are, excuse me. Glorious doesn't feel like a debut album. It feels more like a mixtape, and that's disappointing. I think more thought about track listing, versatility, vulnerability, features, and song construction could have went into this album. My top three tracks are number one, Don't Deserve, number two, Rain Down on Me, and number three, Queen of Memphis. And this has been the Cat Podcast, episode 520. Thank you for watching. Leave your opinion of Glorious by GloRilla in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Follow Old Milk on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Old Milk Media, and check out oldmilk.co for more information. I'm Nate Sperlin. That is Taylor McLeod, and we'll be back when hip hop tells us to be. We are out. Thank you for watching once again.